welcome back to the Pewtercast. Our friends... Nope, whoa, that sucked. Hold on. I can't do that. Try it over. My eyes got twitchy. Welcome back to the Pewtercast. This is our final thoughts episode, the second half of it, and now it is time for us to look to your fellow fans, to our fellow fans who have sent in emails, they've sent us comments, they've sent us questions, and it is time for us to answer those and respond to those. I am Brent Allen, your host. Back with me, as always, Ren Dax, my co-host. Ren, how we doing tonight, buddy?
Hanging out, being cool. I don't know. I'm good. Yeah, I don't know. I was going for energy, and I didn't know what to say. But yeah, I'm good, man. I'm let's kick this pig.
Yeah, we are back at it. All right, well, friends, this is a segment where we usually start by taking a look at iTunes reviews. And I noticed that, once again, we have a new rating, but we have no new review. So thank you to whomever that was that left us a rating. Looks like it has stayed within the 5-star kind, which is the kind that we like the most. But I will also take this opportunity to encourage anyone and everyone out there, if you have not left us a review on iTunes yet, we would love to read your iTunes review. We'll do it right here in this segment of our show, or at least whatever this winds up looking like as the off-season continues. But you can do that. Just go over to iTunes. You can search for us. Click rate, please. We love the 5 stars variety. And you can review us, leave us a little review, and we'll make sure that we read it here on the air and respond. Lots of you guys have already done that, and so thank you to everyone who already has. And by the way, if you listen to the Pewtercast on a different podcasting platform, if there's an ability to rate or review us or something of that nature on that platform, please do that there. But also, please go over to iTunes and leave us a little rate and review there, and then just go back to listening to it on whatever platform you prefer. Ren, we've got lots of emails to get through tonight. Let's jump right into them. What do you say?
Yeah, let's kick this pig.
Let's kick this pig. I think this email, our first email, is a new emailer. I might be wrong, but I think he is a first-time one. It's from Demetrios.
Yeah, let's kick this pig. You think I could go like the whole hour or however long we go tonight? Just I'll just say that it'll be like Smurf.
If you keep that up, I predict people will turn this show off within the next 3 minutes.
Aw,
let's kick this pig.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if anyone hasn't seen the movie Down Periscope, I invite you to go watch that movie. It's very funny, and where that line mostly comes from.
I do not invite you to go see that movie.
It's so funny. It's so good.
It's not terrible.
He's got a tattoo of a submarine on his, the weenie tattoo.
Why are you quoting a movie no one's seen?
It's got Kelsey Grammer and Rob Schneider and someone Holly. Thank you. And it's funny. It's Harlan Williams is in it. I'm going to have to go up.
Oh, look.
He's the sonar guy. And then the radio at the night. Okay, sorry. Demetrios, he emails us in. He says, gentlemen, this is Demetrios from Larghetto by way of Northern Virginia. Now, I got to be honest with you, Ren. I saw Larghetto and I went, interesting. It wasn't until about the third time I read this through that I realized he's talking about Largo. And I guess they
Larghetto.
They refer to it as Larghetto.
Because I was just typing it into Google.
Where's Larghetto? No, this is going to be Largo. Let's go with Largo. He says first an observation regarding Jameis and the quote unquote narrative. Today is a bad Jameis day with 3 picks. Peruse Twitter and you think that he was Henry Burris. Living in the DC market, I was listening to sports radio after Cousins tossed 3 picks against the Giants. The narrative is about how he'll likely leave and the team will be worse off for it. It's just interesting. What do you – so, we talked about this a little bit, Ren, on the Instant Cast. Jameis throws 3 picks, but we win. it kind of covers it up a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah. And, I didn't really see that much of I can't really remember. It's been a few days now.
Uh-huh.
But when Jameis turns over the ball, I think for the rest of his career, there's going to be a handful of people that are going to jump on Twitter and jump on Jameis. Mm-hmm. And you're just going to have to accept that. And then there'll be a few more people that join in if he makes a turnover that quote unquote loses us the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like we probably would have won that game, like the Green Bay game, probably would have won that game if he didn't hand the defensive, tackle the football and he runs on the field and scores. So I'm just accepting that. And for your sanity, I suggest you accept it as well.
And I would just not listen to sports radio in the DC market with the Redskins up there and Kirk Cousins. Although there is at least one person out there who thinks that we should get rid of Jameis and bring Kirk Cousins to Tampa. Moving on.
Okay.
He says, second, am I the only one that sees Kamara the Katana crushing us and thinking that a back like him would dramatically change our offense? I know it's bigger than just him, but after adding him to the Saints worth a year older Breeze with a year older Breeze, they're a different team in terms of balance and overall team identity. Keep up the excellent work, Demetrios. What do you think about that? Adding a surefire running back like Kamara the Katana. I like how he says that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, but let's not forget. I mean, good old Alvin didn't get picked up till the third round. Right. Hindsight's 2020. If you knew what he was going to do coming out of college, he probably would have been a top 10 pick. Somewhere went, where Elliott and Gurley went a couple years before, last year and the year before that.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I get it, but if I was going to point to one thing for the Saints' success this year, they've never, even before they had Kamara, and then don't forget about Mark Ingram, mm-hmm. They didn't have a problem putting up points. The problem was stopping people. They had to put up 35 points a week to have a chance to win. They've been 7-9 the past 3 years. It's their defense. The rookie Lattimore and their safety, I can't remember his name, but I think he was a Florida guy. I'm not sure. But, their defense has really improved. They brought in Manti Te'o over from the Chargers. Mm-hmm. And I liked their defensive line last year. I remember watching them and going, man, I don't really I don't understand why New Orleans is so bad, because their defensive line was really strong, like physically strong. And I thought they all moved really well. Of course, they have, Cam Jordan, so that helps. So, yeah, it'd be great if the Bucs had that, that back. But, it'd be great if they had Le'Veon Bell or Ezekiel Elliott or Kareem Hunt or Jordan out of Chicago. I mean, you just go down the line. And once again, I have full faith that Jason Light's going to fix a running back position this offseason.
Well, he has to. I don't think he has a choice, right?
Right.
So, yeah, he has to. Here's the thing.
I guess he could roll with Barber and re-sign Sims and just say, okay, I'm done. But he won't.
No, he won't. I mean, he brings up a good point here. We have said quite often that the biggest need on this team is a defensive end. But we had Chris Fisher from the Bucks Brief podcast on the first half of the show, the one that was released yesterday, as we are recording this and people are eventually listening to this. And he was talking about the draft a little bit, just saying, hey, listen, he's the best player available guy. And if the best player available at pick number 7 happens to be a running back, do you maybe
trade down?
I mean, yeah, possibly. Of all the quote unquote weapons for Winston that we got this year, mm-hmm. the weapon we never got was a running back. right? We just got our old running back after game 3. And, we had the other guys who, was still pretty good. All these other weapons were passing options, right? We never really had the running option. And, I mean, we can look at the year in review. Okay, so Jameis Winston gets hurt. Let's say it was the second game, actually, that Minnesota game. And then all of a sudden the deep ball gets off and, he's getting wild with the ball. He's overamping himself, whatever things we want to talk about why Jameis was having trouble and struggling in the first part of the year. Admittedly doing a lot better in the second part of the year after he got some rest and came back from the injury. What difference does adding a dynamic running back like that take? What does that change as far as the weapons are concerned? It could change a lot. If we can get that running game going, if we don't get behind by 3 touchdowns, it certainly could change a lot. I'm still not picking a running back, I think, in the first round. But I mean, Ren, haven't you talked about a little bit how this particular draft is pretty stacked at the running back position? Like, we could probably find a good quality running back in the mid rounds.
We could find a first round running. Like, people talked about last year's running back class being stacked. This one is probably double stacked, like twice as many prospects.
I think I remember people saying that last year about this year's draft.
Yeah, like, you think this year's good, wait till next year. Yeah. And it delivered. They all delivered. And a few more cropped up. I mean, I'm sure you've heard, and I'm sure the listeners heard, and they watched that national chip game, and they're probably drooling over Chubb and Michelle. Yeah. I could. For some reason, I wanted to call him Chael Sonnen, the MMA fighter. I'm like, no, that's not it. Is it Sonny or Sony? See, that's where I'm getting.
I'm going to call him Sony until somebody corrects me.
I think it is Sony. So Sony Michelle and Nick Chubb.
Okay, how did wait a minute? How did his parents come up with that name? Like, are they in the hospital room? Yeah, like no, Sony. Like, are they in the hospital room and they need a name and they look up and there's a Sony TV on the wall? Or so I've got to ask the question.
No, you don't. But yes, maybe it's an old Sony Walkman. That's how they met. They met at the skating rink, sharing. Remember the Sony Walkman with the dual headphone plugs?
Sure.
So you could listen. Sure, you don't remember. But so you and a friend, quote unquote, could listen to the same tape or whatever radio station was on. You could both have headphones in. So
yeah, that's how we always had the earbuds, and you put one in your ear, and they put the other one in their ear. That's
earbuds.
Yeah,
earbuds.
Yeah, but they were the ones that like hurt your ears after 2.5 minutes of listening.
Oh yeah,
and they never stayed in. Yeah, those.
Yeah. Well, we used to have to wear these things called headphones. With the piece of metal, something like you're probably wearing right now,
it'd
but a real tiny, real tiny version. So yeah, that's how it happened. That's why they call them Sony, because that's how they met. So
it's first date.
let's answer that mystery. But my point is, you're watching those two guys and how awesome they are. Well, the running back from Auburn won SEC Offensive Player of the Year. So I mean. How good does that guy have to be? If these two monsters from Georgia, like, they didn't win the best offensive player in their conference, another running back did. You might be able to see if it was a quarterback or maybe a wide receiver, but no, another running back. And then, of course, Peter Report is talking a lot about Rashad Penny, who, rightfully so, he's good. You got the guy out of USC, you got the guy up in Oregon. I mean, it's stacked. It really is. It's super stacked. So a first round back you could get in the third, especially picking as high as we are. Like, if you really wanted to roll the dice, you could wait till the fourth. It depends on the draft breaks, and you could get one of these guys that maybe I've talked about. So.
Or, Jason Light has a tendency to trade back up into a second or into a third round. And pick that next guy a little bit early. He did that with Kendall Beckwith. We saw him do it with Ali Marpet, I believe, was actually a trade back up to get him.
Aguayo.
We did see it with Aguayo. Unfortunately, that one did not work out.
And I think he's did it every year. He did it first year with Marpet. Year 2, he did it with – that was the Jameis draft. No. That was the Jameis. So he did do year 1.
Yeah. Well, yeah, year 1 was with Lovey, though. right?
But he
Who's
was
the
still the
first one in
GM. That
11?
was Mike Evans, ASJ, and I really don't remember who. I don't think anybody else is on the team.
They're not. Mike Evans is the only one left.
Yeah. So
yeah,
he didn't move up then, but the past 3 years, he's moved up.
Yeah, he moved up to get Alley, and then Aguayo, and then Kendall Beckwith, actually,
right,
in this last draft. So, all right. Well, that was Dimitrios's email. Let's move on. Next email is from Trevor. Trevor has emailed us before. He writes and he says, "Dear Brent and Wren, please excuse the length of this email. With the season over, I've got a lot on my mind."
Okay, I'm going to go smoke, and I'll be back. Read away.
Don't do that, because I'm going to stop. He says, I am surprised that Cutter has been retained for 2018. I thought a pair of 5-game losing streaks in 1 year would have sealed his fate, but I guess I was wrong. I am hoping that I am also wrong in thinking that this is a bad idea. Yeah, Ren, you and I pretty much gave our thoughts on this personally, for most of the season, but certainly in a bonus episode we did last week called Welcome Back Cutter. We had special guest James or Greg Allman, not James Allman. Greg Allman of Tampa Bay Times, he was with us, and great. We've had a pair of really good guests on the show here lately, Ren.
Yeah, it makes you think we should have tried a little harder to get guests during the season. Wow, those are really good shows. What's different about it? Oh, it's not us.
It's not just us. He goes on. Now, with that being said, Ren, you and I very clearly on the side of keeping Cutter. We think that's actually probably the best thing. That's our thought. That's our opinion. I can understand people who wanted to get rid of Cutter. I really do. I happen to disagree with you. And a pair of 5-game losing streaks in 1 year is certainly something that has to be answered for. But so I get that. I don't want to invalidate your surprise. But Ren, I think I speak for you, and I know I speak for you when I say this. We're just on the other side of the table from you on that one.
Yeah. If you were surprised that Cutter was retained, or I guess not fired, because they didn't re-sign him or re-up him, they just didn't fire him, then I think you need to sort of widen what you're reading as far as Buccaneer outlets. Because there were a couple outlets that, it was a foregone conclusion that Cutter was gone. And there were a couple outlets where we're like, hey, just, slow your roll a little bit. We've seen this song and dance for with John Gruden, nothing's – and then you could give arguments why Cutter – deserves a third year. Not that he did a good job. It's just that a lot of things went against us as soon as, almost immediately after the preseason game. It just, everything just sort of went sideways quickly. So, if you just maybe, I could be talking out my butt. I don't know. Maybe you do read it all and that was just your personal feeling. But if you were shocked by it, there's plenty of stuff out there that you could have read that, sort of, I guess, would have cushioned the blow.
Yeah. And there was even one of the major outlets that had been kind of banging this drum all year long, right at the 11th hour, kind of came in and said, hey, by the way, don't be surprised if this doesn't happen.
Right.
So anyway, he goes on to say, he says, so now that a 5-11 2017 season is wrapped up and we know who the head coach is going to be, what do you think the expectation is for next year? I would think that another season with 6 wins or less and Cutter is gone. I cannot imagine another playoffs or bust outlook. He says, yet I cannot imagine another playoffs or bust outlook. So in my estimation, that puts the expectation that 7 to 9 wins and hopefully showing improvement across the board. What do you think, Ren? What do you think the expectation is for next year?
It's too early to tell. We haven't signed. We don't know who's coming back. We haven't signed any free agents. We haven't had the draft. It's just too early to tell.
Yeah.
Now, what does that really matter? Because last year, after we had all that information, we were way off. We flipped. We were 6-7 wins off. But I do want to say about the if he goes like 6-10 or 5-11. And you think it's an automatic firing, you just don't know. Like I said this earlier, maybe a couple pods ago. If the Bucs start off like 3-0 and then Jameis breaks his leg, and they only win 2 more games and they go 5-11, are you going to, there's plenty of things in there and plenty of scenarios that you can think of, plausible scenarios that would just wreck a Buccaneers season next year.
Right.
And it wouldn't be Cutter's fault. Let's say that James does break his leg, but sort of the last half of the season where we kept losing by 3 points, yay, win. What if we did that for the next 12 games? But we just we'd only could pull out a couple of wins, but we're always like a field goal off, and we're really undermanned. Would you say that neither the coaching staff did a good job? I don't think so. But yeah, as it stands now, as the team stands right now, they do need to improve. And if it's the same exact injuries, however plays out the way it did this year, I think if Dirk went 5-11, yes, he would be fired.
I think that it is a dangerous thing for me, this is a lesson learned from last year, Ren, and I think I'm going to just reword exactly what you just basically said. At this point, it is dangerous to say playoffs or bust, which is actually what Trevor's saying here, or to say we have to have this many wins or he's fired, or that many wins or he's fired. It's too early to say that. It's too early to put that, on the to put that on the table. Like, let's just wait and see what happens. Right. Look, listen, if we're to believe all the rumors of this year with Gruden and everything like that, it certainly seems like they maybe would have made a change because they wanted to get Gruden more so than they wanted to get rid of Coach Cutter. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
And I'm
kind of like Ira was saying, it's either Gruden or don't make a change.
Exactly. And I'm glad Ira kept saying that, because that's eventually where we got to, or at least that's what we had been saying, I think. We weren't even saying that. We weren't saying Gruden or don't make a change. I think we were just saying don't make the change.
Yeah, I was saying, I didn't want Gruden.
Yeah, because I'm still going to lean to give Cutter the full run of his 5-year contract, with a very few exceptions, and I don't think any of those exceptions have really been met. So, even if we go 5-11 next year, depending on what's going on, it's one of the things that I think I like about the Glazers is the fact they don't make major changes in the middle of the season. They wait to the end of the season, gather all the information, and then make a decision. In general, I think that's a general rule to go with, and it'll serve.
Yeah, well, they haven't changed yet, and that was in the middle of a season where they lost 10 in a row.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so
I think you're pretty safe with that.
Now, to be fair, Ren, as people are listening to this, at least the first downloaders, will be a Thursday, and we'll remember that it was 4 days past Black Monday. It was a Thursday night, about 10 o'clock at night, when the tweets came out over our phones that told us that our head coach, whom we had assumed was safe, was not safe. So, while I fully expect Coach Cutter to continue to be our coach, I'm going to be watching my phone a little closely tomorrow, just because you never know what those tricky Glazers are going to do. But
those wacky boys,
those Glazer kids,
they should be in down Periscope.
No, they shouldn't.
Oh, they're not that wacky?
No.
They would mess with something sacred there?
They would take what is very clearly a lovable B movie and turn it into garbage. Anyway, moving on. Trevor says, he says, I'll save my thoughts on specific personnel moves other than stating the obvious upgrades needed at defensive line, defensive back, running back, and offensive line, and go into coaching moves. I think the defensive staff other than Duffner needs to go. Although if the DC they bring in is an established name and wants to bring in a different linebacker coach, so be it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to happen. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's fair. Yeah.
I really hope that I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm like, I really hope Jay Hayes gets fired. That's because I don't want to word it that way.
Uh-huh.
I don't think Mike Smith is going anywhere. But I would like to see some changes on the defensive side of the ball. And obviously the worst sticking point has been Jay Hayes. And as I've mentioned on a few of our previous podcasts, people in Cincinnati where he was there as long as Marvin Lewis was there, which was something like 10, 11 years. And they were not sad to see him go. And the reason was, from what I heard from Cincinnati fans, because I went and asked them, was that he didn't develop any of their young players, like any of their young defensive line guys who came in with all this, sort of hype. The fans felt they never sort of reached their potential. Happens once, okay, but over a 10-year period, and you start to get the hold of 3, 4, 5 of these guys, and none of them blossom, you got to start looking to coaching at one point.
Sure.
And then if you sort of look at that, like Noah Spence didn't improve, Chris Baker has sure gone backwards. Gerald McCoy, you could say he's improved, but he's so good. It's like one of those things like, oh, LeBron's, shooting percentage went up this year. It must be the coach. No, he just had a little bit. He's had a little bit of a better year.
Right.
Golston seems to have digressed this year or regressed. Digress. I don't even know if that's a word. So you can go up and down the line. Clint McDonald did improve a little bit. So if you, I will be extremely leery, I guess is the best way to put it, if there are no changes done to any of the defensive coaching staff, I will be frustrated by that. But if there's only one, the one that I can point to with the most confidence as, hey, because from what I know from the outside looking in, I would like it to be Jay Hayes. Nothing personal.
All right. I'm going to agree with you on all of those points and move on. He says on the offensive side of the ball, I think Cutter should consider a different play caller, but wouldn't be surprised. By the way, this email came in before Cutter's closing press conference of the year, just to be clear. He says, I think Cutter should consider a different play caller, but wouldn't be surprised if he keeps that responsibility himself. I wouldn't be shocked if Warhop is gone, but also understand keeping him as well. I think the one definite change on offense needs to be Bajankian. I think Winston needs a different voice in his ear and someone that can clean up the multiple things at one time. I'm not suggesting it all can't be fixed quickly. However, it feels as though right now, as Jameis improves one area's game, another area suffers. I also think that whoever this QB coach is, that he will be a stickler for mechanics. I think Monken would be a good candidate for either play caller or to move to the QB coach.
I don't think Bajakian – I think it's Dirk Cutter's thing, When John Gruden wouldn't get the hell out of the building in Hard Knocks, he's standing at the door like, right up the road, dig the trench, whatever the hell he was talking about.
Right.
Like Cutter was in the quarterback room. He's sitting there with Bajakian and all the quarterbacks. So, and I don't know that I can't remember this 100% for sure, but I remember last year's exit presser. I do remember this. He said he misses sort of the working one-on-one with the players, and what he really meant is the quarterbacks. And he made sure this year. This is what I'm a little hazy on, but the old held a gun to my head. I'm going to say yes. I think he worked his head coaching schedule so he could be in the room for the quarterback meetings because that's where he needs to be in there with Jameis to him and getting on the same page. So saying that Bajakian has to go because he's, you need a new voice, I get that, but it's not going to change because the voice really inside his head is Cutter.
It's still Cutter, right?
Still Cutter.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the other side of that coin, though, Ren, is when you see Jameis on the sidelines, like sitting on the bench going over a play, it's always with Bajankian.
That's true. That is true.
And so Bajankian certainly has a big hand in what happens, but I can see what you're saying. Bajankian might really kind of be the whatever Bajankian says, it's what Cutter's kind of saying. Does that make sense? Like
right.
It's Cutter's voice kind of filtered through Bajankian a little bit, and Bajankian is going, well, what would Dirk Cutter say in this situation? Now, we don't know. We're not privy to those conversations. It's pure speculation. I don't know. there have been some media outlets and podcasters out there who have suggested that the problem with Jameis Winston has been Bajakian. That Jameis was doing fine until Bajakian got a hold of him. And, it's the quarterback's coach. So I
What
don't.
year was that?
It was this year. It came out this past year.
Well, when did Bajakian get a hold of him? And when
2 years ago. It would have been when. Was
his
it
rookie year?
Was it his rookie year?
You're saying Jameis was fine in his rookie year? I'm trying to say he was fine.
Yeah. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that that's what they were saying.
This sounds like a Scuttlebuck thread. I don't know if you listen. Do you listen to that one?
I have listened to a few of them, and it's just not my style. So, for the people who like that, great. It's just not me. Let me just say this: it's the third Scuttlebuck. It was the third Scuttlebuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They will blame the grass being cut too high. The guy that the groundskeeper doesn't cut the grass low enough if Jameis trips a lot. Like they're knowledgeable, but they covered Jameis in college and they still think he's that guy. Well, I saw him do this in college. Well, yeah. It's the Patriots playing the Browns, 9 out of 11 games, Florida State, back when Jameis was there.
Mm-hmm.
You could throw 9 interceptions and still win the game by 14 points because you were out athleting everybody on the field. So, I listen to him weekly. But yeah, there is no wrong. Jameis Winston can do absolutely no wrong in these guys' eyes, and they will blame anybody they can and think of and make up stuff. Well, I don't know if they're making. I'm sure they believe it, but just to not lay any of the blame at the feet of Jameis.
Yeah,
so I guess I was right.
Yeah, here's the thing. My problem is I just don't know enough about Bajakian or what he does or what he's been doing with Jameis.
That's a good point.
To make a judgment call on this at all, because so much of what's happening with Jameis, as you pointed out, Ren, is colored because Dirk Cutter is working so closely with them. So it's hard to know, is it Bajakian, is it Cutter, is it Jameis? Where does that go? Now we can shift this view, say, over to George Warhop, because he's very clearly our offensive line coach. I don't know. Do we have an actual running backs coach?
Yeah.
Who is that?
I wanted to say Moxie, but it's not. He's DBs or safeties.
Yeah.
Just give me.
Yeah, but either way, as I pointed out, I believe Cutter has said a few times that it's actually Warhop who decides which running back is playing. Like, for whatever reason, Warhop has a little bit of control over that.
I've never heard that. I've heard you say it.
I'll have to go find it. It was something he said. Tim Spencer. Okay, it was something he said in a presser one time that I kind of went, "That's interesting. That doesn't make sense to me." But okay, that's why it sticks out, in my brain, in my mind. But Warhop, I'm kind of a guy. I want to point at the two line coaches and say if somebody's got to change, I want to see a change on those two things. Listen, George Warhop he's the only holdover in the coaching staff besides Cutter himself from the Lovey days. I know the players love him. I don't know if he's a good coach or not. From what I understand, the players loved Raheem Morris, but couldn't get it done as a head coach. And I don't know if it's just time to get something new in there. I don't know, but those are the two. Those are the most two underachieving units on the team, and they shouldn't be. And Warhop has been here long enough, and he's had Ali Marpet, Donovan Smith, DeMar Dotson, who is the senior member on this team, not Gerald McCoy. For everybody who wants to say, what's the common denominator between everything else that it's Gerald McCoy? No. DeMar Dotson's been here this whole time too. Kevin Pamphil's been around for a long time. This is Caleb Benenoch's second year? Third year?
Yeah, second year.
Second year. So the offensive line group that we have of players is not a lot of new guys. Arguably Sweezy is the newest person that we've had.
Yeah.
Right?
He is. So, there's no argument about it.
So the fact that George Warhop has had these guys, he's had them for a long time, and the offensive line is still not playing well. And whatever the god awful, mind numbing thing about rotating out that left guard position this whole year, To me,
I wonder whose decision that is. I mean, does like Warhop go to Cutter and go, "Hey, I want to do this"? And he goes, "Okay, they're your guys. You're the coach. You would know best."
Ren, but see, you're getting to what I was saying on the first half of the show, the one that went out yesterday. Does Cutter turn a blind eye and just allow these guys to do whatever because that's not his thing anymore? No, he's the head coach. He is responsible for it all. I don't care if he's the one who actually makes that decision or not. At some point, he's got to look at him and say, "You either fix it or I'm taking over." You know,
I'm all for letting your coaches coach, but they're going to coach you out of a job.
Yeah. So to see George Warhop get replaced wouldn't make me cry. No offense against him, kind of like you were saying against Hayes. Nothing personal.
Don't drag me in your Warhop hate.
Okay, fine. George Warhop, you're a really nice guy. I hear you're great, but to me, that would be a big change. That to me would be the bigger change over play calling or Monken or QB coach or anything like that. That to me is probably and maybe that running back coach. I don't know. That's you could certainly have a discussion on Doug Martin, Jacquizz Rodgers versus Peyton Barber, what kind of a job he's done with those guys. So, but moving on, Trevor closes up his email saying, lastly, with Gruden likely going to the Raiders, it feels as though there was a bidding war for Gruden that the Raiders ultimately won by reportedly offering a stake in ownership, probably the one thing the Bucs would not have offered. Or if the Bucs were never seriously considering Gruden, they were used as leverage against the Raiders with all the groomers. Either way, if the Bucs go 4-12 and the Raiders go 12-4 in 2018, a lot of Bucs fans will lose their minds. I look forward to listening to your insights on the team's move as we progress through the offseason. Go Bucs, Trevor in Orlando.
Yeah, go Bucs. We sort of done the Gruden thing to death, and anybody's guess. There's pick a narrative that you want to. What happened with Gruden and why he's not here and why he's going to Oakland. I personally don't think he's going to get a stake in the team. I think I saw a quote today where John Gruden said, no, I'm not getting a stake in the team. But he's also come out and said, if the Raiders offer me,
I'm taking it.
I'll take it. It basically means I think the contract's signed. They have to comply with the Rooney Rule.
Right.
So he's just like, well, I guess if his bags are packed, man. They're shopping for houses. Yeah, he'll be there.
Yeah. So, thank you, Trevor. And by the way, your whole last email, yes, that is what we said. It doesn't matter how it goes. If Gruden goes on a streak next year and we don't, people will lose their minds. All right, next email comes to us from our friend Jim down in Costa Rica. Do not believe this is his first time. I think he's had a few emails in this season. He says, "Hey guys, listening to your podcast on the final game." This would be the instant cast. He says, "And you need to rethink this business about Jameis and Mike Evans. The record."
Okay.
The fact that Jameis was deliberately targeting Mike in order for him to win a record, even to the point of throwing picks, that's just wrong. And the fact the Bucs won doesn't make it right. The win was as a team. The team goals are set by the coaches and executed by the team, not some weird Jameis-Mike bromance. What about the Glazers? What about the coach? What about the stats for the guys like Godwin and Brate and Howard? What about the efforts and sacrifices of the whole team? Selfish and immature. Jim from Costa Rica.
All right, Jim. I agree with you 100%. That's why I said beforehand that I would lose it if Jameis forced the ball to Mike, try to get the dumb record. Now, the Instacast is all about raw emotion, and it had been so long since we won a game, I didn't care about any of that stuff. I'm just, hey, all's forgiven. We won. Don't worry about it. Mike got his record. Everything's cool. But it does disturb me that, I guess follow the Bucs closely enough, and the Saints defensive coordinator is probably keeping an eye on that too, that Jameis was going to try to do that. And yes, it's bad. And if you remember I also said, I believe during the Instacast where, Jameis I got it when Mike caught that 50-50 ball in the end zone with two guys on him, and Jameis saying, I just got to trust Mike more. And I'm like, Not with two guys on him. You don't.
Right.
Like no, you don't. Yay, Mike, great catch, but that was not probably the best place to put the best place to go with the ball on that play. So I hear you. I'm sorry that I was a little jubilant over the win, but I'm on your side with that 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really am. But if you're that close to hitting a record, you don't sacrifice the game for it. Let me put it that way. In no way, shape, or form do you make a stupid decision just to make that happen. However, you may try to focus a little bit more on that, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with the other team knowing that too. But again, you can't put the game at risk. That's the I want to say coup de grace, but I'm using that phrase incorrectly if I say that. So that's just not something you should do. But anyway, thank you, Jim, for your email, because I think in general we definitely agree with you on that. All right, Ren, well, moving on, our next email is from our good buddy, Chef Aaron.
How long is this one?
Grab some popcorn, buddy.
All right.
All right, he says, my apologies for missing the deadline last week. I was super busy with Christmas and the holiday week. That's it, Aaron. You only get one miss for the entire year, and that's going to be it. So it's calendar year, buddy. He says, I'll just get my thoughts out of the way regarding the loss to the Panthers quickly. So he's going back a couple of games. He says, same thing we've seen all year. Bucks found a way to lose. If anyone had a problem with the Jameis outburst, you know good and damn well that if you got screwed by the refs, you'd be outraged as well.
Yeah. That's one way to look at it.
I didn't have a problem with his outburst. I really didn't. But that's just me.
I didn't either.
Yeah. He says, now on to the Saints. Obviously, it's always good to come out with a win. I'll admit I was hoping for a loss for the 5th overall draft pick, but I'll say if people condemn me as a Bucs fan, remember in 2014 against the Saints, a majority of Bucs Nation was praying we'd lose so that we could draft Jameis. I remember in 2006 when we won against the Browns, and that cost us getting Calvin Johnson or Joe Thomas, both future Hall of Famers. I understand the moral victory. I just don't want it to be at the cost of a franchise player. We've talked about this to some extent, and the only thing that I could say to that is, you're assuming that we would have taken Calvin Johnson or Joe Thomas, which we very well might have, and we probably should have. But I also remember picking 4th and getting Gaines Adams, and we know how that turned out, right? Listen, we went from 5th to 7th. We're going to get a good player, or at least we should. I think, Jason Light's a much better talent evaluator than anyone we've had here, probably since Rich McKay. And, I'm not worried about who we're going to get in the draft this year.
I am not either.
Yeah. Of course, we can revisit this in 10 years if the guy that we picked this year turns out to be a total dud. And the guy who went 5th is amazing. He says, on to the game. Cutter called another good game, but like I've stated all year, I'm concerned with the consistency of his play calling. Obviously, we now know that Dirk won't be giving it up next year unless we see the same stuff with being allergic to the end zone, and maybe he's forced to give it up. I'll stop there. I don't think that Dirk's ever going to be forced to do anything, not midseason. I don't think the Glazers will force him to do it. Jason, I don't know. I just don't see them stepping in to force something like that in the middle of the season. What about you, Ren?
I don't think so either. And I don't really think that, and I could be wrong, I don't think any upper management has forced a head coach or an offensive coordinator to give up play calling. It's more the head coach telling the offensive coordinator to give it up, or the offensive coordinator has decided that it's a good idea. I mean, we saw it happen twice this year that I know of. Ben McAdoo for the Giants gave it up, didn't save his job. Mm-hmm. But Andy Reid, they started out 5-0, then I think they lost 5 in a row, and then he gave up play calling. So it seems to be working out for the Chiefs. So yeah, it's I don't really know all that goes into it, and to be able to have an informed opinion, you'd have to hear the play call, know what it means, and then know where Jameis was supposed to go with the ball. And then, you also have to put in the offensive line, how they blocked on that play.
Did the guys execute what was called?
Right. There's so much that goes into it. So that's always going to be an internal
decision. Did the defense
decision.
do something that just forced an audible at the line, or, something that blew it up altogether? So
right. Or they just make a great play.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's hard. It's just hard to know that. And, it's hard. He goes on, he says, we know Smitty is coming back. He gives us a little emoji with the eyes rolling up to the top of its head. But this team had better get rid of Hayes, Warhop, and Nate Katzer. He's the special teams coordinator. If Dirk doesn't, he's basically saying that it's on the players and not the coaches, which is a flat-out lie, is what he actually means here. He says line, means lie. After weeks of him saying after each loss, it's on the coaches. If we go into next season with every coach intact after such an overhyped season, going 5-11, that's basically the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I don't care about the horses narrative. Hey, that's mine. The best coaches can make chicken. Hold on, more emojis. Chicken salad out of chicken shit is what that is.
Is it? Or is it chocolate ice cream?
Chicken chocolate ice cream. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Either way, it still is shit. We talked a little bit about Hayes and Warhop. We didn't talk about Katzer, though, Ren. Special teams coordinator.
Right. Yeah, Craig from Vegas did on the Instacast. He came in, and then he opened with that.
That's right.
He's like, Katzer's got to go. There's a flaw, I think, and I don't know if it's a flaw, but the way that Dirk Cutter feels that he has to use all 46 guys on the active roster, I don't understand it. It's like we have Bernard Reedy, so we're running jet sweeps to him instead of Bobo Wilson or Deshaun Jackson. We're having Jaquiz Rogers return kickoffs because he's only get like 2 touches a game. So, well, we got him. So let's get him in there. And then what he said at his exit presser, which was something that, I noticed earlier, and I'm sure a lot of people did too, is when these guys, all these people started going IR, they're bringing all these people up to the active roster. They're putting them on kick coverage, and they hadn't practiced kick coverage for pretty much probably a couple months. So now you got your Bobo Wilsons, you got your Riley Bullas, you got your Rivers, the cornerback. I'm not sure if he was in the practice squad or came up, but you have these guys that only get in like 5-6 times a game. And it's his thinking, where, if these guys come up, will they become the special teams players? And my question is why?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to replace somebody. I get it, but Ali Marpet didn't play kick coverage, Jared Sweezy didn't play kick coverage. So it was like when Chris Godwin was doing so well as a gunner, and then Deshaun Jackson goes on, now all of a sudden he's not gunning. Well, what's 1 or 2 more plays, 4 more plays? Like, what do you punt the ball 4 times maybe? An average, maybe it's like 3.5 or something. Is 3 more plays really going to kill Chris Godwin? Running down as a gunner, are those 3 plays, is that going to take away? I doubt it, because if they're punting the ball, then guess what? He goes right to the bench, and he gets to sit there, and the soonest he'll be in is 3 and out. I'm sure that 1 more play is not going to exhaust him to the point where, he doesn't run his route right, or he's too tired. You see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, but the other side of that, though, Ren, is if he gets hurt on a kick coverage thing, and he's our number 2 receiver at that point, or whatever he is, oh my God, can you imagine why was he playing that play? Should have been someone else. And
well, he's playing because he's not letting the guy score a touchdown.
Yeah.
Which these other guys are.
Why are we playing Jameis? Let's sit him for the rest of the season.
Oh, remember that? Yeah. Sit Jameis. The season's over. Sit Jameis for the rest of the year.
Well, I mean, we'd even get crap like that in the middle of a game. We're 4 scores down. What's Jameis still doing out there? Put him on the bench. He might get hurt. He's out there because we're still 4 scores down. That's why.
Yeah. So yeah. I get. I mean, there's logic to both sides of it. I just don't find it necessary. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't find it necessary to give Bernard Reedy the ball. I don't feel it necessary to put Jacquizz Rodgers back there on kicks. I don't feel it's necessary to sit Chris Godwin on punt coverages. Just because on your 43-man roster doesn't mean they have to play. And once again, if there's spaces on the coverage teams or return teams that somebody is injured, then yes, but not just because they're on the roster. I don't get that line of thinking. But once again, the next time I step out on an NFL field as any type of coach will be the first time.
Right. I think as far as me, Katzer's it's an interesting. It's an interesting proposition because you could argue and even go back to Roberto Aguayo. Like for whatever reason, he couldn't get Roberto Aguayo to do what he needed to do. Now, was that on him or was that on Aguayo? I don't know, but he couldn't get Folk to do it. Was that on him or was that on Aguayo? I don't know. We had a couple punts blocked this year. We had a couple that got returned. We had but then again, we also had, remember that, what was that play last year that they got the big meme designed around it, the smooth criminal play?
Yeah, but that's individual effort.
Right. And we had like another similar one this year. Brian Anger certainly was doing well, but also our gunners. Our coverage teams generally have been pretty good as well. So,
but then Ryan Smith got pushed into a starting job and now no longer a gunner.
Right. And that changes the,
why? He has to come out on the field one play early and then get a TV timeout?
Right.
It's like, I don't get it.
You're the first person who I've heard put it that way.
Me too.
I agree with it. Yeah, it's a good question. It would be if you could sit down and say, okay, explain this to me, coach. Like, I don't understand why we do it this way. Like,
or why we have to.
Just football theory. We're not even talking about individual situations. It's just coaching philosophy and theory, right? So, good point. Good point. All right, he goes on. He says, with all due respect to Ren, he said his theory on Baker doesn't make that much sense. So does it really matter how poor he's played? Do you remember what theory you're talking about? Can you explain that for us?
I was saying not so fast on Chris Baker getting him out of town. As a fan, I'm just like, yeah, get him out of here. But you still got to replace him.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so if you don't want Chris Baker to start, and then, you can reduce his role. He only played 9 plays in the Saints game, and I think that was more of a punishment than anything else. But he's really not that expensive. It's going to sound retarded, like when I look up his salary, but for a first-day signing free agent, it wasn't that bad. Like, he'll be making $4.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
The next 2 years we have him under contract. Yes, there's no dead cap, but none of us really know how he is in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if he's poison in the locker room. We know he's sort of a goofball.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. We know that his spectrum tends to skew towards the happy-go-lucky. Mm-hmm. We get that. We know that.
But on the other side,
disappointment.
But on the other side, we also saw he was also tweets. And that might be a dangerous thing. I think some of these guys might need their Twitter accounts suspended during the season. But, I remember a few times after a loss, he'd say, we can't be this bad. Don't worry, fans. We're going to get back and we're going to work on it. And we're going to fix this.
Right, yeah.
So there's at least some acknowledgement of, man, that sucks. And this is not the way we want to be. And we're not accepting this.
Instead of just laughing all the way to the bank.
Right. Now, what good did that do us in the end? Not much.
Nothing.
But still the point being, now it's funny you say that because Aaron goes on and he says Baker could make $500,000 and still not be worth the money. He came with the reputation of being lazy and hating practice, and that is the exact opposite of what this team needs. Practice develops player skills, and Baker really hasn't done anything in the league to warrant taking so many days and OTAs off or training camp, especially when he's coming into a new defense. Clint McDonald makes less, I think, and in his tenure, he has constantly played with a chip on his shoulder. He has 5 sacks compared to Baker's half sack. How many millions are the Glazers paying for a half sack compared to what they're paying for 5 sacks, I wonder?
I'm looking for Clinton McDonald right now. I can't see him. And those are all good points. You know, he's right. What I'm saying is that you have to replace him. And the person you replace him with,
is it going to be better than him or equal?
Well, yeah, maybe not. That's where you have to see. You can diminish his role. I mean, if this, feeling that Baker is terrible in the locker room, then that warrants more towards getting rid of him than his actual play.
Okay.
If that you can understand that. Sorry, I had to actually type it in. Clinton McDonald is a unrestricted free agent, but he made $2 million last year.
So he's making about half of what Baker would be making. So yeah, see, here's the thing. And I remember saying this last offseason. I'm going to say it again. I'll probably say it a few more times this year. The idea that people bring up, oh, well, here's how much money he makes and here's what he does. I don't give that any credence. And this is a perfect example. You could have somebody who makes $8 million versus somebody who makes $2 million or $600,000, which, to any of us, those all sound, immense. To these guys in their world, it's not that much. Or, the difference there is pretty vast. But, if the $2 million guy is doing better than the $8 million guy, then so be it. I'm not going to sit there and go, well, that's Jason Light's job to worry about that with the cap. That's not my job,
Right.
We get in and Doug Martin's making however many, $5 million or whatever this year, and Peyton Barber's still probably making league minimum for
I
a
looked that up yesterday.
player or something like that.
For his first 2 years combined, he hasn't made $1 million yet. He's going to come in like around 950. So I think he made
because league minimum's like 450 or something like that.
I think he made like 550 this year.
Yeah. So, it's but Peyton Barber went out there and did it. I'm not gonna poo-poo these guys just because of you make this much money, so you should put this much into it. It's no, that's just what they got when they signed their contract. Not every contract is fair.
Yeah,
some people have better agents.
You don't get what you're worth. You get what you negotiate.
Right.
But Chef's points are all on spot on.
He is.
But but putting on my GM hat, like it's not necessarily to me a done deal that Chris Baker's out of here.
Sure.
$4.8 million for a second contract, first day signed free agent isn't a lot of money. It's just not. I'm going to look up real quick, see what Will Golston's making. Will Golston made. He will make 6.5 next year.
So he'll make more than Baker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and how many sacks did Golston have? Go ahead, I'll wait. One?
I think
None?
it was less. I think I'm gonna think it's less than 2.
It doesn't matter. It's down there. It's not 5. It's definitely not 10.
So much better.
But Golston he's a different player, does different things. So anyway, the thing that you say is
they have him as none.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think that
but
we as fans,
those guys were supposed to be sack guys.
Sure.
Sure.
What? It's just whatever point I'm trying. What am I trying to say?
You're
right
all. Now? I don't know. I keep interrupting you. Save the best for last.
Yeah, don't ever do that again. Down Periscope, good movie. Squirrel. Baker. Here's the thing. People talking about Baker and being a bad locker room guy. I don't know that he is. Now, he might be. It seems to me to be. This would be what we call a quote-unquote narrative. Baker is a bad locker room guy. And how do we know that? Because he doesn't like to practice, because he wants to make love to trees, as we saw in Hard Knocks. Or also they got to yelling at him in the locker room, and we just happened to hear it.
Right.
Right. And I think I think that Bucks fans are, our threat ganglia are standing on end because we've had that recent experience with Baker.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And Baker really hasn't produced.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a slam on him. It's just a fact. He's really just not produced, not like he normally has. So, all of that tends to lead to that narrative. But the truth is we don't really know. We don't know what he is in the locker room, and I certainly don't want to assign those motives. However, I am still
there's fire.
There's a lot of smoke about Gruden, not much fire, not much kindling, at least as far as the Bucks go. But I still tend to look, if I'm putting on my Johnny Carson, what was that? The Karnak, the Karnak turban. I think Baker's probably going to be gone this year. That's just a guess. It wouldn't surprise me. But
and it wouldn't surprise me at all either. Mm-hmm. I'm just sort of saying that he's under contract for a couple more years, and they might just see if that was an outlier year.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, like I sort of alluded to, if he is sort of this terrible locker room guy, then that changes the whole Chris Baker narrative in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the GM, he's what the defensive coordinator wants. He's a big fat dude in the middle that's supposed to be able to take four hands, on a regular basis to control.
And wasn't the other thing with that though? We weren't using him like that.
We weren't using
that's the other side of it, right?
There is the narrative that out there about how Golson, Ayers, and Baker, and then they added up their salaries, and it's like $11.5 million, and there's only 2.5 sacks out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Ayers has 2, Baker has a half, and Golson have none. But Golson and Baker don't rush the passer.
Right, they're not in on passing plays. Right.
Yeah, they're not in on obvious passing downs. So it's kind of hard to get sacks when you're not in when they're running the shotgun. It's just so that was a little silly and deceptive on purpose. To sort of get your point across, the point that that person was trying to make. But once again, I'm just saying that. Do I, in my heart of hearts, think Chris Baker is going to leave? Yeah, I think so. But I'm not going to be like flabbergasted, like what are you doing? If he's not, because from a business standpoint, you still got to fill the roster spot, and his salary is not. He's not making $11 million a year.
Sure.
He's making less than 5.
And to your point, you can't judge him on he only has a half a sack. He only whatever criteria we're using to judge him, which really right now seems to be mostly either sacks and what we suppose is his locker room attitude.
Right.
Right. Which again, we're not in the locker room, so we don't really know. We're interpolating on top of that. And the half sack, he's just not being used in obvious passing downs. So, maybe there is a different evaluation process for those who make that call other than we do. However, we're still sticking with probably gone. Aaron moves on. He says, special teams over the last 2 weeks have been a joke and maybe the worst in the league this year. Allowing 200-plus yard kick returns is unacceptable. They've also allowed punted blocks. They've allowed two punted blocks. Unacceptable. Brian Anger didn't have the year he had last year, but he's still one of the best punters in the league, in my opinion. Hell, you could say he's the MVP of special teams. Murray, I believe, is the kicker of the future, but I do believe in Wren's idea of competition. The last 2 kickers were given the job, Aguayo being drafted and Folk by default due to Aguayo's ineptness.
Yeah, I agree with all that stuff.
Yep.
You could never give up a kickoff return. I don't care how long it is.
Yeah.
And then do it in back-to-back weeks, and then throw on 2 punted blocks. How did he word it?
One of them returned.
Yeah. I'm sure that autocorrect got him there. But yeah, and I'm still high on Brian Anger. And I would like to see Pat Murray as our field goal kicker next year. But I think, especially the way Dirk sort of talked about him in the press conference, the way he talked about it sounded more like he was a Band-Aid than anything else, you know?
Yeah. I've thought about that press conference. I went back and watched it earlier today. And I don't know. I feel like some of that is Dirk just kind of talking off the cuff a little bit, not really almost like he was sort of stammering around. Like it may not be what he actually – kind of like what he was saying with the offensive line. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
like it's just something that's in the back of his head. It's not necessarily what he really thinks. Or maybe he just wasn't – there's a frankness that he speaks with his other coaches that doesn't necessarily mean this is how I feel about everything. I mean, take the way that you and I were just talking about Baker, right? Like you and I both said, we think that in the end Baker will probably be gone, but we were also making the argument for why he could stay. Right. Well, if somebody came in and just heard us making the argument for why he could stay, the headline's going to read, Brent and Wren of the Pewtercast think that Baker should stay on the team. Well, no, that's not necessarily the case. I use that as an example to say, just because this is what Cutter maybe said in the press conference, I don't think it means the next step of, Murray may be gone. Although, certainly him calling the offensive line and Pat Murray out and saying what he said about both of them makes you scratch your head, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But, I mean, not Pat Murray so much, honestly. But I will also I like the theory that he got injured in that Atlanta game.
Yeah.
And he did. I mean, because he was
It makes more sense.
The Carolina game, like, he was all over the place.
Yeah.
Extra points are just squeaking in. Field goals are just squeaking in until he finally missed.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, and that was the next game. And then, of course, he missed the extra point.
Mm-hmm. And his kickoffs, the distance on his kickoffs really seemed to take seemed to lose about 5 yards or so on him.
I didn't notice that, but, I take your word for it.
I'd have to go back and look and see how many of his kickoffs before the Atlanta game people were going deep into the end zone and people were taking a knee versus how many were attempted to be returned versus after. Hey, Fish, I know you're listening. Go find that number out for us and let us know. But that would certainly lend to the idea that he was injured early and lost a little bit on his leg.
Right.
For that. So anyway, Chef goes on. He says, once again, our season ends in January and we get to see other teams compete for the Super Bowl. We are now second in the playoff drought to the Browns after the Rams, Bills, Jags, and Titans made the playoffs. It makes me sick that Mariota gets to go to the playoffs after the crappy season he put up and his team won in spite of him. I wish Jameis's team could do that. Now the Mariota fans are going to gloat their asses off.
I don't know about that. I think they know that he had a pretty bad season by his standards, or kind of anybody's standards. But that's what happens when you have a defense and an offensive line and two above average running backs in your backfield.
Mm-hmm.
You can just sort of lean on them and get them to win games.
I think it bugs me more the fact that they got into the playoffs at 8-8 and we missed the playoffs at 9-7 to the third tiebreaker last year. That bugs me. That just bugs me. The playoff system is, as well as it's set up, is not set to bring the best 14 teams into the playoffs, or 12 teams, or however many. I think it's 12 teams. It's not set up to bring the best 12 teams in the league.
No.
And so maybe we should have playoff reform, but we won't, as long as Roger Goodell's there.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah. All right. He goes on and finishes this out. He says, this offseason is the biggest of Light's career. He needs to hit on a free agent and have an amazing draft. The 2018 season is going to be the biggest of Dirk's career if he wants to see the future of being a head coach with us or even somewhere else. This team needs to find a pass rush in the worst conceivable way, and if they don't, it'll be this year all over again next year. This team also needs to find a run game in the worst conceivable way as well. If they can get Jameis a rushing attack, that will do wonders for this offense and hopefully get TDs instead of field goals. I feel like every year is the biggest year of anyone's career in the NFL. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it's you could definitely make an argument for it.
Yeah. The upcoming year is always the biggest year of your career. But I get what Chef is going for here. I think that for Dirk and Light both potentially, and probably more so Dirk than Light, the I don't want to say the seat is going to be hotter this year as much as it may get warmer quicker this year.
It'll get warmer quicker for sure.
It's going to be under more scrutiny this year than it has in previous years. But I'm still gonna say I think Jason Light is one of the best GMs that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have ever seen. I don't know if I'm ready to say he is the best yet, but I think he is definitely one of the best. And I like when people try to go through all of Light's picks and say, oh, this guy was a hit, this guy missed, bust, miss, bust, bust, bust. Like when you look at the averages of free agents that have actually been a hit and the averages of draft picks he's made that have been a hit, he is above average in both of those categories. You're not going to hit on every single one that's out there. What is it? The number is like for free agents is something like if you hit on 30% of them, that's good. That means 2/3 of your free agent signings can be bad and you're still considered good.
Kind of like this year. I mean, I don't know if you want to call Conti a free agent signing, but he was. But let's look at the big three. It was Ward, Jackson, and Baker. Ward and Baker easily dismissed as misses. But if you talk to Dirk, at least in that exit interview, put an ISO camera on Djax, he wins most of the time.
Right.
So as far as the coaching staff and organization is concerned, Djax is a win. They're just not, it's just not panning out on the scoreboard and on the stat line for him yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 1 for 3. It's 30%.
Yeah.
33% actually.
Yeah. There you go. And I mean, and you could honestly, Bobby McClain, he was a pretty good, signing for what we needed him. Turns out we needed him quite a bit this year. Trying to think of who some of the other, certainly keeping our guys, was a thing. But I think if you look at free agents, you got to think of the people you brought in from other teams, right?
I'm sure they all count, in that stat. But, when you're just talking to the guy next to you at the bar, that's, those are the three people are going to talk about.
Right.
They're not going to really talk about Bobby Mack. They're not going to talk about, Chris Conti. They're just not.
Mm-hmm. He goes on, he says, one last note, the bonus episode regarding Cutter and what Rin said about a possible fourth year for Cutter if he doesn't make the playoffs, I respectfully disagree. Injuries happen and you can't predict them. Every team has injuries, but the great coaches find ways to overcome them. For example, the Patriots, Seahawks, and the Vikings. I don't buy the Jameis injury being a factor since he only missed 3 games, not half the season, and Fitz did go 2-1 in relief. No excuses next year. It's 10-plus wins, playoffs, or bust. I hope Brent, Ren, and all of Bucs Nation had a very Merry Christmas and an even happier New Year. Go Bucs, and hopefully 2018 is our year. Sent from my iPhone.
He typed all that on his iPhone. Once again, Chef's not wrong. There's a lot of people in that camp that's got to be playoffs or bust or double-digit wins or bust. But there's just so many different scenarios out there that you can save. Now, it's going to be it's going to have to be a really wacky scenario, for 5 wins to get Cutter a fourth year. But like you said earlier, it's too fluid and it's way too early to sort of put a number on the team and say, if you don't hit this, you're fired. It's just NFL's a week-to-week league, man. We see it year in and year out. And, so I feel you, and you're probably more right than I am, but I was just sort of, trying to make an argument about, not necessarily, sort of like the Chris Baker, not so fast. Probably going to happen, but,
All right. Next email comes into us from Frank. This is our Goic buddy there, Ren. that we were asking about. Yeah.
Mike Golick?
Yeah. Nope. This is not Mike. It's Frank.
Mike Golick.
Yeah.
That's an odd. That's a little close to his original name. Why would he take an alias so close to his real name?
Yeah, well, you have to take that up with him. I think he actually tweeted you back some point in the last week.
He was like, "Yeah, sorry, buddy, it's me, not Mike Golick."
Right. He says, "Dear Brent and Ren, I just listened to the Instant Cast. Great show as always, and I have some thoughts regarding Jameis Winston." He says, "It was great to be able to end the season on a win considering all the adversity this team has faced. But this game," speaking of the Saints game, "is a microcosm of what has gone wrong this season. The ability of the offense to move up and down the field between the 20s was on display, as it has been all season, but again, the inability to execute in the red zone combined with the missed extra point and field goal continues to be an issue. Jameis Winston must improve in his decision-making, and as it relates to interceptions, all interceptions are not created equal, and my biggest issue are the poor decisions that led to the interceptions. He threw 3, but there was one that was particularly egregious, and the ball should have never been thrown. This is where he must improve if he is going to go to the next level and become a franchise quarterback. The touchdown pass to Chris Godwin to cap off the 95-yard drive still shows his limitless potential if he can just execute better decision-making on certain situations and cut down on the turnovers."
Yeah, check.
Yep.
You're right. Spot on, buddy.
Yep.
Good email.
He says, the season, a lot of weird things happened, and there were tons of injuries, including to Winston, and I do think those are mitigating factors in the decision to keep Dirk, but I do believe that he has one more season to turn this around, and if not, then there will certainly be a new coach in 2019. He says he just found the Petercast this season, and we do a great job. From Frank Goick.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, and once again, that he sort of echoed what Chef said at the end of his email, and you're probably right. Once again, I'm just I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. I'm just trying to acknowledge your email. Is strange things happen. So I get you, and you're probably right, but there are scenarios out there where if he doesn't make the playoffs or doesn't get double-digit wins, that he could be back.
Yeah, if we were to keep it into the all things being equal, without the weird situation, if he has another season like this, probably looking at a new coach next year, I would think.
Yeah,
but there are mitigating circumstances that could change that. But I am going to stick to it. It's just a principle that I think serves well. Give him the full run of his 5-year contract. Except for a few things, and the record is not one of them on my list anyway, but that's just me. Next email comes from our friend Andrew from over in the UK.
All right.
He says, "How you doing?" He says, "I emailed you earlier in the season questioning Jameis's progress and Dirk's position as..." I wish I could read this in an English accent.
You can't do an English accent?
Nobody shoot me. He says, oh gosh, I always try to channel dude that played Frodo, Elijah Wood, when I do an English accent.
He's not English.
I know, but he had to play in English. He had to speak with an English accent in that movie.
What?
Says, I emailed you earlier. No wait. Oh, Sam, I emailed you. See, I'm gonna totally piss him off.
That's not an English accent.
Whatever. I emailed you earlier in the season. No, see, I can't do it. I suck at accents. Right. I suck at accents.
It's fine. Jesus God.
I could do it in like a Foghorn Leghorn accent. Give me a southern. I emailed you earlier in the season questioning Jameis's progress and Dirk's position as head coach. Now the season is over, and I'm happy to say that I was probably wrong on questioning both points.
You can stop anytime.
I'm going to stop right there. He says, I think Jameis has had a good season. His stats have been good. He needs to iron out the silly mistakes, but we knew that when we drafted him. Question for you guys, though. Do you think he will ever get to a place in his development where they can get those ironed out, or is this just what you're going to get with a quarterback like this?
I think, once again, I think the interceptions are under control. As long as Mike Evans isn't up for any record in the last couple of games of the year, he won't force the ball ever again. I really think the first interception, which Mike quit on the route, so not all on Jameis, and then he tried to force it into double coverage. By the time the ball got there, there were sort of 2-3 receivers in the same area, and the defenders peeled off, and there was 4 guys around him, and it got picked, when they're in field goal range. So 2 of those, were him trying to force the ball. So maybe in an alternate universe, you can say he only really threw 1 if it was a normal game. But I think that's like sort of I don't want to say maturity issue, but sort of get your priorities in order. It's like we're trying to win the game. Like, who really gives 2 craps about Mike Evans' record? You win the game first. It's like, you know what your record is? You're just about to go like 0-9 as a starter. After you won 2 games, that's what your record is. Like, get your head out of your butt and like win the game. So I think and you take those away, and it's still, he had 11 interceptions.
He had 11.
I'll live with that every year.
He had 11 interceptions in playing in
13 games.
13 games, which means he had less than 1 per game. Now, I think, now talking about these silly mistakes, I think it's a little bit of all of yes. Yes, they can be ironed out. Yes, it will further in his development. And yes, this is what you're going to get with a quarterback like this. I mean, all the way around. But here's the thing, and this is what I think makes Jameis's it's what makes this a much bigger deal in our heads than it is in reality. Okay, because you look at it, 11 interceptions over 13 games, that's less than 1 per game. That's not bad. And when you compare the number of interceptions that a quarterback has, that the good quarterbacks have, look around the league, quarterbacks are going to throw picks. Tom Brady throws them, Aaron Rodgers throws them, all the quarterbacks in our quarterback-heavy division, they all throw picks, and they throw a lot of them throughout the course of the season. And their let's talk about touchdowns. They also throw a lot of touchdowns. And Jameis's touchdown to interception ratio is equal to or better than all of those guys in their third year, or in their third year of starting. Let me actually just put it that way, because some of them didn't start till a season or 2 in. Jameis's his numbers aren't that off. I think the 2 things that makes them seem a worse situation than they are, is that when Jameis throws picks, he seems to throw. It gets like he's streaky with it, right? Like he'll throw 3 or 4 of them in a row, and then he goes a bunch of games without it, and then he does 3 or 4 in a row, and it drives you mad, right? Now I don't know if we would rather have them spread out over the course of the season. Just throw 1 per game, and we'll give you 1 per game and not worry about it. I don't know if we would want to do that either.
You want to throw 1 on the opening drive that they catch at the 1-foot line and fall down, so they get first down on their own 1-yard line.
And then our defense comes in and sticks it in.
Well, whatever. If they have to score, they got to go 99 yards, but that's what I want. I want, get it over with right off the bat, and then they have to go 99 yards to score.
But I think the fact that it's streaky and they come in clumps, that heightens it. But then what that number doesn't account for are the fumbles and the turnovers that come in either from Jameis turning it over or from a Peyton Barber or a Doug Martin or somebody else turning it over. Those are the numbers that it's not accounting for. And even with those fumbles, a lot of those fumbles were somebody coming up behind Jameis and knocking his arm down, and that's not so much on Jameis as much as it is on the offensive line, generally speaking. Now, there are times when that's just Jameis holding on to the ball too long or needing to eat it rather than trying to throw it. But, as our last emailer said, not all of them are created equal, right? So, I think in general that, yes, this is going to get cleaned up. I don't think it's as bad as it seems. Like, people talk about the silly mistakes and, he makes bad decisions. I'll say the same thing about Jameis's bad decisions that I say about Dirk Cutter's play calling. If you're listening to the guys on TV and every time they go, oh, that was a bad decision, or, oh, I don't know why he called that play, and you use that to say, oh, he's a bad play caller, or, oh, he's making bad decisions, watch other football games. They're saying the same thing about the other guys. Mm-hmm. And if we expect Jameis to go out here and be a playmaker and be the gunslinger and all of those things, picks are going to happen. It's just what you're going to get with a QB like that, and we know that because we see it happen with the other QBs like that. And you've got to live with it.
I'm with you. The fumbles worry me way more than the picks. Way more than the picks. I can even take him coming in bunches as long as he only does it like 3 times a year. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're probably going to lose those games when you throw 3 picks. So we go 13-3. That's fine.
Right.
But those fumbles, man, that's really got me a little spooked, and that'll be a watchful eye for me. Starting off next year.
And those will be things that I think actually do get cleaned up.
We'll work on them for sure.
Yeah.
But fumbling the ball is different than throwing a pick. Throwing a pick is a bad decision. A fumble is like, it just like you said, it happens a lot of times when he's not looking and holding on the ball too much. I mean, there's some things he can do to clean it up. But he almost fumbled on that touchdown run.
Sure.
Where he stuck the ball out.
Sure.
If he didn't break the plane, we would have lost. We would have lost the ball, and Saints would have had it.
And then we see Cam Newton come in and he fumbles the ball on the snap and gets it back and still rushes it in for a touchdown. We're like, oh, why can't Jameis do that? Like,
he did. He just did. Like I just told you what he did.
Right,
he scored the touchdown and fumbled after.
Yeah.
Normally people be, if it was a bad, if he was having a real, you can't say he didn't have a bad day with 3 picks, but if he was having an awful day, he would have fumbled it before it broke the plane.
Yeah. There you go.
So,
he goes on to say, he says, I must say I was potentially looking forward to seeing John Gruden back only for the fact of, what you're getting. Hell of a charismatic coach with Super Bowl pedigree. I know he's been out of the game for a while, but I still think he would have been a fantastic reappointment. And it looks like he's going back to Oakland, and good luck to him. I'm sure he's excited about working with Derek Carr. I know you guys were rooting for Dirk to be coming back, but now that he is, are you surprised? It looks like the same staff are coming back. We've covered that ad nauseum. And he says, we don't have the luxury of seeing what goes on behind the scenes, but we saw enough in the season to think that I am sure some coaching changes are needed. And we've talked about all this.
Hello?
Sorry. Yeah. Hold on. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I'm not covering all the same stuff. He goes on. This is a good question. He says, I know. Oh, just dropped something. He says, I know that they said that we were 7-3 in 1-score games. So that's in games that were decided by 1 score or less. We
3-7.
3-7. Yeah, is actually what we were. We won 3 of them, lost. We won 3 of them, lost 4 of them. 3 for 7. Is that no?
No.
Were we 10 games? Did we have 10 games that were 1 score or less this year?
I'm already on it. Hang on.
Yeah, let's clarify that. I just want to make sure that we're speaking correctly here.
Week 1, we won. Week 2 was not a 1-score game. Week 3, we won. Week 4, 1-score game. So 0-1. Next game, 1-score game. 0-2. Next game, 1-score game. 0-3. Next game, not a 1-score. Next game, not a 1-score. Next game, 1. Next game, 1. I guess those wins. Do we count? I forgot to count the wins if they're 1-scores or not. So Falcons.
Either way. You know what? Either way. Either
Sorry.
Way. Yeah. We were whatever in 1-score games, but I know a lot of games they have just been unlucky. But there was still a lot of ugly losses in the season too. Do we blame Mike Smith or Dirk Cutter himself? What do you guys think? For the losses, is it Mike Smith or is it Dirk Cutter that we blame for the 1-score losses, but also the real ugly losses of the season as well?
I blame the defense. And if you want to put that at Mike Smith's feet, we want to put it also on the pass rush. But if you remember early in the season, this has kind of gotten lost a little bit because we have played so many close games.
Mm-hmm.
These last 5 or 6 have been very close, win or lose. But Buffalo threw the ball all over us.
Mm-hmm.
The Cardinals threw the ball over us and ran the ball over us. The Patriots moved up and down the field. They just couldn't get it in the end zone. The Vikings, geez, remember that Vikings game? It was like there was nobody covering anybody.
Which game?
The Vikings.
What game? I don't remember a Vikings game this year.
Okay.
At all.
Okay,
did we play?
Why? What's going on?
I've junked it from my mind. It's
Oh, how bad it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't play the Vikings this year.
Okay. Well, we lost to some team pretty badly up north
in a really nice stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but once again, like last year, sort of turned it around, but it wasn't such a success as a 5-game win streak. At one point I was talking about, is Mike Smith's defensive scheme like outdated? Is it just antiquated? And teams just know how to beat it. Like, you just can't run the Tampa 2 anymore because offense finally figured out where the weak spot is. Who knows? Do you want to blame Mike Smith? You want to blame the pass rush? You want to blame Mike Smith? You want to blame the cornerbacks? You want to blame Mike Smith or the whole entire defense? Well, eventually the whole thing gets laid down at the feet of Mike Smith. So for I guess the bad losses or the soul crushing, like the Bills wasn't a bad loss, but it was like 3 points isn't a bad loss. But it was the way we had the lead and Tyrod Taylor goes right down the field and then we fumble and then like no one decides to tackle anybody and they let them go in. It was just it was bad. You just like the Saints game defensively, just ugly. Like they didn't want to be there. It was just bad. And then the game that doesn't exist for you, they just beat us like a drum. Like It was whatever they wanted to do, they did. So I'm going to say yes, but he doesn't put on the chin strap, He's not suiting up.
Yeah. I don't know. My problem with this question, is I have a hard time with just blaming one person. Like this whole year we want to put it on one thing. And if we fix this one thing, then we're good. Or it's this one person's fault. It was the kicker's fault in the Patriots game. It was this fault in that game. It was this person's fault in that game. It was Jameis in that game. It was Mike Smith here. And it was Dirk Cutter's play calling there. Listen, it's an amalgam of all of it. I can't just sit there and say, who am I going to blame for this one? I hate that. And by the way, we do this as a society. And I'm not trying something goes wrong and we want to find the guy who's at fault and pin it on that guy. Somebody has to take the fall for, this bad thing that just happened wherever. Come on, guys. It's more than just the one. Generally speaking, it's more than just the one. And that same thing. That's why football is a great metaphor for life, Ren.
Sure.
But I have a hard time putting it on one. Now, that said, the person who is ultimately responsible for what the team does on the field is the head coach. So if you've got to put it at one person's feet, it's Dirk Cutter. And if I'm going to put it at one person's feet, it's going to be Dirk Cutter because, as I've said even a few times tonight, there comes a point when Dirk has to look at the other coaches and say, you either get it right or I'm taking over. And because that's his job as a head coach. And, that's part of the mantle you put on when you become the head coach. So, if I'm answering your question, I'm going to say it's Dirk Cutter, but that's just because he's ultimately the one responsible. All right.
I blame not wearing I'm not wearing red uniforms at Ray J start the season.
It's the
That's
white.
what I'm blaming.
It's the white. Yeah, let's blame that.
Even though we did win our first 2 games at home.
I blame Irma.
There we go. Yeah.
Let's blame Irma. All right. Next, blame culture. I blame the Lightning, the hockey team, not the actual Lightning. Next email comes from Adam. He says, "Hey guys, I can't remember if you've already discussed this topic. We might have. But what do you think about what do you think about Evans and Godwin on the outside with Djax in the slot?" Actually, we have not talked about this. I've been real impressed with Godwin and feel like he needs to play more next season. This might help Djax get the ball in space across the middle of the field more often. Also, this is my first year listening to the podcast. Do you plan on continuing through the offseason?
Yes, and we're going to do what we did last offseason. I know you just found it this year, but we went every 2 weeks, and there were long shows. Like they were like 2.5, 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the plan now.
We may record it as one show, Ren, and break it up a little bit and space out the giving of the show.
Whatever
Possibly.
You want to do,
it just
Mr.
depends.
Producer.
Yeah,
whatever you want to do, Mr. Producer.
Just depends. But yeah.
But so the short answer, yes, we will be continuing it.
Yeah. And whenever there's like a special thing that pops up, like
the draft,
or Dirt Cutter
signing,
yeah, or they just released the schedule or something like that, you'll probably get a little bonus episode in the middle. That's probably, and we'll play it by ear the whole season, the whole off season.
And it won't be little. We always say it is, but it never is. It's never a short episode.
No.
So, yeah, I think that's what everyone's wondering is how the hell do we get Chris Godwin on the field more?
Yeah.
Now, Chris Godwin as a rookie, they have put a lot on his plate, but from what I understand, he was trying to learn the outside receiver positions. Now, Chris Godwin could possibly play slot. D-Jax could play slot. They could move him around. Mike could play some slot. And they talked about that at the beginning of the year. You didn't really see a ton of it. Maybe like in bunch formations and they were close to the line. You could sort of call that like, Mike Evans playing the slot. But they're going to move around. So I could see – but I know what you're asking. Like you line up in your basic 3 wide receiver offense, which would be 11 personnel?
Mm-hmm.
And – where are they going to line up? Like first play, I would like to see Godwin and Evans on the outside with D-Jax the slot. I just don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if they think that they're going to take away his speed or lose his edge or like take away his greatest asset would be stretching the field. It's a little harder to do from the slot than the outside. But I also have full confidence that Chris Godwin, during the offseason and OTAs and training camp, can learn the slot position and sort of unseat Adam Humphries as the slot guy. But one thing is for sure, Chris Godwin needs to see the field more.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you. He needs to see the field more. This is why when we get to the spot where we talk about people who might not be here next year, people who are coming up, that Adam Humphries tops my list. As much as I hate that, because I like Adam Humphries, I like him on this team, and I would like to see him stay. Weapons for Winston were loaded, and I talked earlier about making sure that we keep depth, and that's a big reason why I want to keep Adam. But can you really go out there and put 4 wide receivers on the field at the same time? Very often. Not very often, not 4 downs, not 3 downs or whatever. You start losing people at that point. But I am all for moving any of our guys around. But to the people, I want to take this opportunity, to the people who think that we should get rid of Deshaun Jackson and just replace him with Chris Godwin and go that way. As good as Chris Godwin has been, he still does not have the speed of Deshaun Jackson. Mike Evans still does not have the speed of Deshaun Jackson. Adam Humphries still does not have the speed of Deshaun Jackson. And to abandon the idea of getting more speed on the team after one season with a quarterback who has potentially been hurt since the second game because he, quote unquote, couldn't hit the deep ball, which we all know he had problems with that. I'm not ready to give up on that yet. And we've got Deshaun Jackson. We've got him under contract. We're paying him a lot of money, but not a stupid amount of money either. Like it's reasonable.
QB money.
Yeah. I'm not willing to give up on that yet. So, and by the way, I do think, and this is from one video that we saw, I do think that D-Jax is a good person for the locker room. I think he brings a veteran maturity to this team. That for a team full of a lot of young players, to have a guy with the maturity of Deshaun Jackson, I like him on this team. So I'm not willing to give up Deshaun Jackson in place of Chris Godwin, but I agree with you, Ren. We've got to find a way to get Chris Godwin on the field more. And that said, Mike Evans is still our number one. And I think when you have a number one, you have to go to your number one more often than you do your other guys, generally speaking. So,
yeah.
All right, final email in for the night. This comes from our friend Atlanta Bucks fan Dan.
Oh, all right.
All right. I don't think we've heard from him in a while. He's been in the Instant Cast in the chat rooms. Every single game. Every single game this season, I think he has been there. But he writes in, he says, Ren and Brent, wanted to get you my final thoughts on the season. He bullet points these. I like when people bullet point stuff. It makes it so much easier to read. Hint, hint, everybody. We appreciate everybody sending emails, however you send them. First thing, culture. Of course, a very disappointing outcome for the season, but was it really that much of a surprise? Sure, we retained a significant arsenal for Jameis Winston, but the problem that everyone talked about was culture. In my humble and accurate opinion, everyone jumped the gun and thought culture was fixed with a winning record. Kind of silly if you think back to how there was so much talk about how culture doesn't change over the course of a season or two. I think it's still changing.
Yep.
This guy gets it.
Oh god.
This is what I'm just gonna say he gets it. He gets it.
Brent,
I'm not running on about
Buck
it.
Fans are culture brothers.
He gets it. Yes. You don't fix it in one season. It takes longer than 2 seasons, by the way, to fix a culture.
You got to align your chakras.
Yeah.
It takes a long time.
Yeah. And I'll, for everybody that looks around at the Jaguars and the Rams and the Bills and these guys haven't changed their stuff yet either. It takes a long time. Let's wait and see what happens next year and the year after and the year after. He goes on, Swaggy Baker, another somewhat disappointing signing, but I'm not nearly as disappointed in him as I have been in some of the other free agent signings, Folk, Ward, and Sweezy. I say of these, Baker was the least of people's concerns. Also, I don't think he needs to be run out of town just yet. They should just bring in some competition for him and let him run himself out. This is kind of how I feel about Djax as well. In fact, any serviceable free agent is worth keeping around for another year. This is really not a plug-and-play type thing here. People are too quick to give up on someone that does not come in and totally outshine their predecessor.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I like to look at it too. What if Chris Baker comes back next year and has this great season? And this sort of just was his outlier of the bad one. I like the way he's thinking. Was Sweezy, Ward, and Folk more disappointing? See, I'd have to go and look at Sweezy. He did sort of flash sometimes with like mistakes where he just like missed beat. Well, that's what I mean. Sometimes. I have to go back and look. I will say, I don't know. You look more than me, but
yeah,
that's gonna be a tough sell. Sweezy more disappointing than Baker, at least to fans. But he said that to him, so okay, I get you.
But here, I to me, this is what's going to seal it. As we said earlier, Baker was not in on the obvious passing downs. And if you're really judging him based off his sacks, which is what most people are judging him based on, we're not judging him based off his tackles, although that would certainly would be down as well. I guess that's a total guess. Sweezy was in on just about every play for the offensive line, and the number of times that offensive line blew up based on guard play on either side of the center. Yeah. I would back up what he says here, although I don't have the actual numbers sitting in front of me to be able to say that from a data standpoint.
I saw someone tweet it out today, and I didn't keep it, and I should have. But it was like game started, total penalties, how many yards that cost the team, and if the penalty was a holding or a false start, and it had every Bucks lineman.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, so I know that. I should have kept that.
Yeah. Dan goes on. He says, running backs. Sorry, Doug. You get bus ticket number 1. Sorry, Jaquiz. You get bus ticket number 2. Thank you for filling in last year, but your services are no longer required. Barber has proven he can pound the rock better than all of our other backs. He also has all of the offseason to learn how to block better. Maybe that's a coaching issue. Going to have to find new blood for the stable. Sims is okay, but such a niche player. It only makes sense to keep him around if he's still affordable. Love what he can do in open space, but is it worth the roster spot for 4 or 5 big plays a season?
Yes. But once again, he's right. It depends on, how much he's going to cost in free agency.
Yeah. Chris Sims, Charles Sims is a guy. I think there's a number. I think there's a good number that I'd be willing to pay if I'm a GM to keep him on this team, but I'm not going to go over it.
I sort of see him as this year's Russell Shepard.
Okay, explain.
Jason Light had a number. Carolina went over it, and they really wanted to keep Russell Shepard. I mean, they offered him something like $2.5 million. That's the number I heard. And Carolina's offer wasn't that much more, but it was sort of the promise where you're going to get a real shot at the number 3 wide receiver spot, and he just wasn't going to get that here. So I think that's the same way it's going to be with Charles Sims. They're going to have a number, and if someone pays him a little more. Charles Sims might go, but as a third down back, I know I've said this a bunch of times, but he always makes the first guy miss. Always. Not when he's running the ball, but when you get him out on the edge in space, he makes the first guy miss every single time. Yeah. And if you're a third down back and you're a check down flat guy and you catch it and it's like 3rd and 7, you catch it and it's like you got 3 yards or 4 yards to get the first down. If you always make the first guy miss, it's like that's what you need to do. I just think for a third down role, there's, obviously I don't follow the other teams and who's out there, who's better, but he's one of the best in my opinion. He's one of the best, and I'd like to have him back.
I will say this after watching this season. First of all, Charles Sims finished the season much better than he started the season. I mean, and it almost correlates to when Peyton Barber was in versus when Doug Martin was starting. I don't know why. I don't know why that would make a difference. But it almost correlates to a T with how that works. Also, Charles Sims is much better when he catches the ball 1 or 2 yards beyond the line of scrimmage versus 1 or 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Yes. The number of times that they would be at 3rd and long and they would throw Charles Sims the ball behind the line of scrimmage was baffling to me. Baffling. And they did it a lot. But as you say, you think that he's going to be this year's Russell Shepard. I know we talked about him just recently, but to me, the guy who's most likely going to be that spot, and it may be both of these guys, but is Adam Humphries.
No, he's not.
I think so.
He's a restricted free agent, bro.
I know, and so that means that we will give him that we will give him an offer. And another team can either come in and do more than that, and we can either have the option to match it or let him go. And
I think we'll come in and get Adam Humphries.
I don't know, but I don't know. I'm just saying I think it could.
He's our number 4 wide receiver.
Listen, I'm putting on my Karnak turban, and I don't know.
Russell Shepard. So what the hell am I talking about?
Yeah, what the hell are you talking about, Ren? All right, moving on. Anyway, listen, I said a few weeks ago that I was done with Doug. Nothing personal. I'm just done. I don't understand Rodgers remaining on this team, although I do think he'll be here through training camp. And we'll see if he gets beat out. But I don't understand caring for running backs on this team going into the season next year. I understood it going into this year because of the suspension and stuff. Right. I understood it less keeping all 4 of them.
Me too.
But we did. I don't understand keeping 4 again for next year, unless we're really going to do this running back by committee, because we don't need Rodgers to do our kickoff returns for us. No. We've got plenty of other guys who can do that. It's kind of the same thing with Bernard Reedy. Like when we let him go, he was just eating up a roster spot.
Yeah, he really was.
We had other guys to do it. So it's almost like that's what we were doing with Jaquez just to justify him being on the roster. And yeah, we don't need it. Anyway, moving on, he says, coaching, was not a fan of firing Dirk for Gruden. I would have been on board if they were going to fire Dirk anyway, but I don't think Dirk or Mike Smith have been given a fair shot. Maybe some of the position coaches are as bad as Bucs fans say they are. They don't really know enough to make that determination. Neither does anyone except for Dirk Cutter, Mike Smith, and the GM.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep. Which is why I think you and I were both for keeping Dirk Cutter. And
No, I mean about the coaching position.
Well, but even the rest. But we've said that a lot, even in this own episode, Ren. Of it seems like it could be these guys, but truthfully, we don't really know. It just seems like it might be. So I'm not going to make a determination of saying you have to fire this guy or, you're failing.
This guy should go.
I just don't know. It'd be the question that I'd have to ask. If I could get Dirk Cutter in a moment of pure honesty, yeah, I'd love to ask him those questions and see. So he goes on, pass rush, worst of the show. Our general manager has now twice gambled on a player not being injured, Spence and the other one. That would be Jacquees Smith. Yeah. And the over-the-hill Vincent Jackson gambled on him not coming back injured. Let's not make that mistake a third time. I agree.
Okay. Well, Spence is going to be here, so
yeah, right. Spence is going to be here, but I want us to.
He's going to get help.
Yeah, and not be a guy who's coming off an injury.
Well, he will be a guy coming off an injury.
Who is it?
Spence.
So Spence will be here, but then I want another guy.
On
defensive end who is not a guy coming off of injury.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I'd love to say I can guarantee that, but I can't. Yeah. But I think we're going to get somebody in the draft, and I think we're going to get somebody in free agency. Now, one of both of those guys might be coming off injury. Kendall Beckwith worked out, so.
That was a role. He worked out, but we also had Levante David, Quan Alexander, and Adarius Glanton, none of whom were coming off injury.
Yeah, I know, right? But I'm just saying I can't guarantee the guy he picks is not going to be coming off injury because the free agent or the draft guy might. But it's not going to be anybody on the team, that's for sure.
Right.
That's on the team now. Right. Yeah, none of that stuff.
All right. He finishes up. He says, kicker. I remember around 2007, 2008, a kicker we had making a 63-yard game winner in Green Bay, I believe. Too bad that he was all washed up. Sarcasm. Is it really that hard to find a kicker? I guess there's only 31 good kickers in the entire world, and we are just shit out of luck. Says, I could go on for some time, but I wanted to get something into you guys. Hopefully you will have some call-in opportunities through the off-season. Thanks for providing such a great podcast. You are still the best. Atlanta Bucks fan, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. That was funny. I guess there's only 30. Yeah, well, apparently there's less good quarterbacks than that. Yeah. Those are things that always amaze me. Like when you really think about it, like really, you can only find like 26 guys that can play quarterback in the NFL. Are you serious? Like in the whole entire world.
Well, what was it? Who was the quarterback, Ren? He's a starting quarterback, a really good quarterback, but he's like the 34th highest paid quarterback in the league, meaning that there are two backups out there that make more money than him.
Oh, I don't know.
It wasn't Tom Brady. It was somebody. It was somebody that was. It might have been Tom Brady.
No, Tom Brady was like the 12th. No, I think it is Tom Brady.
He's like the 34th highest paid quarterback in the league, meaning there are backup quarterbacks that make more money than Tom Brady.
Yeah, they keep restructuring his deal so they can sign the players they need to make Super Bowl runs. So, and that's kind of the argument I've always had when people are like, "Oh, the Bucks salary cap's going to disappear when it's time for Jameis." I'm like, no. Like Jameis wants to win so bad, that's what he'll do. He'll Tom Brady it.
You also wonder if Robert Kraft doesn't go out to some of the people in the community and be like, "Hey, so we're going to restructure his deal. How about you give him a $1 million endorsement deal, and it kind of makes up for it." Like I wonder if he throws him a bone that way a little bit or something.
I don't even know if that's legal. I don't know if it's legal either, but I do kind of remember like when Dan Marino signed a big contract with Dolphins way back in the day when Wayne Huizenga owned the team. He was the guy that he was like into used cars, and he was the owner of Blockbuster Video. I remember like
that worked out for him.
Yeah, well, maybe he sold. Who knows? But I remember
for the kids out there was a day when you actually used to have to go rent your movies from a store. You couldn't just go online.
You had to get in your car.
Yeah, right. And then you had to rewind it. They charge you an extra $1 if you didn't rewind it. So
yeah, they quit that eventually. But that was a lot of fun though. Going through Blockbuster, you wanted that movie. It was on the new release wall, and it wasn't there, and you'd hang out by the drop box.
You remember having to get the tags between Betamax and VHS and take them up to the counter to get which one? Oh,
what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
At Beta, you weren't even alive when Betamax was at the video store. You were not.
Was.
And you got to be talking about like Albertsons, like mom and pop places. Like,
I remember a place called Movie Warehouse that did that. Anyway, not what we're talking about right now.
Yes, we are talking about it right now.
We are. Yeah.
What were we talking about? Oh, about the kicker. He's missed 3 in a row, but as Fish pointed out, like 2 were plus 50. One was an extra point, but and then we've talked about the injury narrative. So I'm fine with Patrick Murray. I'd like to see some competition because I'm sort of just mad at him because he missed 3 kicks in 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no problem if he's our kicker.
Do you want legit competition or do you just want a camp leg?
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask Fish, but his answers tend to be like 25 minutes long.
And that's different from us. How?
Well, we're not trying to ask each other questions.
Okay.
We'll just interrupt. He's rolling. Boom, and he's off. There he goes.
You and I breathe while we talk, which gives the other person time to interject.
Yeah, that's a good point. Either way, it'd be fine. Jason Light has shown in the past that if he is going to bring in competition, it's serious. He did it with Aguayo. Like I was on sort of in the thinking that sort of saved Jason Light to save his own butt. He would just bring in some camp leg so Aguayo could beat him out, boost his confidence, and he could keep him around for another year. And, not sort of have that huge black mark about drafting a kicker in the second round. But then, when we were talking about, hey, we get to see Ryan Griffin with the ones in preseason, it's going to be exciting. The very next day, they signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, serious competition. So there probably is going to be some serious competition, and I don't mind it. Either way, whatever. Honestly, I don't care. Let me finish it off with that. Whatever competition they bring in for the kicker, I don't care.
All right.
I'm fine.
Well, on that note, that is going to wrap up this segment as well as this episode. Just as a final reminder out there, Bucs fans, you can get in touch with us about anything that we've talked about today at facebook.com/ThePewterCast or on Twitter @ThePewterCast. Or if you're a little more winded than the 280 characters that Twitter now gives you, you can email us to thepewtercast@gmail.com. Right as we round this out, where can the fine people out there find you on the internet?
When Twitter went to 280 characters, how many times did you check your Twitter feed to see if you had it or not yet? If you had it yet?
Maybe 2 or 3 specifically. But then after that, it was just whenever I opened Twitter to tweet, I'd look and see.
Yeah, okay. For some reason, it was a big deal for me. I was like, I was checking it like every 5 minutes. Like, did I get it yet? No. Did I get it yet? No. Did I get it yet?
I in general was kind of against Twitter upping the the character count.
Why is that?
Because there's something. This was going to sound a little ironic. There's something in brevity. There's something in learning how to word things and do things within a limited nature that 280 actually just takes away from. So, because you don't have to be limited anymore. You actually can have a big, long spiel, But at the same time, I've never felt the need, except for the very first time I sent out a tweet with the new character limit, to hit all 280 characters. So
right, yeah. I bump up against it all the time, though.
Yeah.
But I put like double spaces in between my thoughts, and so it's nice and easy to read.
Mm-hmm.
I think my tweets are Twitter reading friendly. Anyway, you could find me on that app we were talking about at Rendax, REN_DAXT. I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football.
And if you guys want to get in touch with me personally, I am at Brent Allen Live on Facebook, Twitter, and all the social medias out there. Well, that is going to do it for us this week. Coming up very, very soon, and we'll tell you guys more here within the next little bit. We have the PewterCast Award Show. That is the only Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan-voted awards that you guys will be able to go out. You'll be able to vote, and hand out some awards for the season for your beloved Buccaneers, no matter whether they're 9-7 or 5-11 on the season. So you guys be on the lookout for that. It's always a fun time. And until then, as we say always, even here in the off season, go Bucks.